Hi everybody, this is going to be a tutorial on how to use some of the text tools in Adobe CC, and we're going to go over quite a few different things on how to break our type apart and also add textures to it. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and type something. So let's say you're working on a branding project and you've got to come up with a logo, and you're working on the typeface first. So first thing I did was I just grabbed the type tool, and what I did was I clicked and I just typed something up. That's how you start typing. Now, a couple things about the type tool is when you grab the type tool from your toolbar, when you click once, you can type. As you can see here, I'm typing, and that's easy. And then you can grab your black arrow, and you can grab the type that you just made, and you can make it bigger. As long as you hold down Shift as you do that, it will make sure it will grow in proportion with itself. If you don't hold down Shift, it can get squishy or something. So always make sure you hold down Shift. Now, one thing about the type tool is you can just click and type, or another thing you can do is when you grab the type tool, you can click and drag and then type. So now if I do click and drag and then type, what happens is it's a paragraph box, which is really cool if I'm trying to line up the paragraph to something or make it fit in a certain area. But if I'm trying to work with making the type really big and small, right now if I try to do that thing I did before where I hold Shift to make it grow, the type actually won't grow, just the box. So always consider whether or not you're just going to type by clicking and typing or clicking and dragging. So you'll either make what's known as headline type or you'll make paragraph type. So I'm actually going to get rid of the paragraph type and just use the headline type. Now one thing I can do, when I'm like thinking about creating a logo or something, is just start to play with logos by making copies of type and then looking through all the options. Now if you want to start to look at the subtleties for playing with type, you can use Window Type, and then you go to Window Type Character or Command T, and that's going to open up the character window, which I'm pushing over here to the right, and you'll see all the subtleties for the type. And if you go into the top right corner, you'll see that you can also go to Show Options. Now the reason I'm doing that is so I can see all the little details that are available for the type tool. Now as I'm going through here, the best thing to do is just go ahead and click on the different fonts that are available, and then click on them, click on their names, and then if I cycle by pressing up and down, this is actually a really fast way to get through types. So if you noticed, all I had to do was just click inside the area where the type name is, and then I can use my up and down keys to go through, and this will work both on PC or on Mac. So yeah, that's a fast way to do it. So yeah, let's say, actually I'll go back a few. There was one of these fonts looked pretty cool. So yeah, that one looks great. And let's say, that's one of my favorites. And, maybe while I'm thinking, I click on this guy, and, then I start cycling through a bunch of different things. If you're working with someone, helping them figure out their branding and working on their logo, you can do this, have a couple options so that you guys can then discuss it after or whatever and figure out what you need. So anyway, yeah, let's say I really like, let's say I really like this one here because it's a little cooler. I'm going to go ahead and say this one is not so good, so I'm going to just delete it, and then I'm going to work on this. Now, one of the things about designing type and playing with type and all that stuff is you can do things by adding color, you can add texture, you can break the shapes apart, you can do tons of stuff. One of the things I actually want to do first is just kind of play with the spacing and stuff. So I'm just going to keep looking here in the character window. Right here, while I still have this selected, I can make the type bigger and smaller, if I want to, or I can also still hold Shift, so I can do that. If I take a look at this setting here, it's one down and then to the right of the type font size. This is the tracking. This one's cool because if you bump this one up, so if you go to like 100 for example, it gives you more room. You see that the words now have more space between each other. Or if I go to negative 100, they get squishier. So this is some of those first things you can do is make sure you have the spacing right on your type so you know what you're doing. Now if you want to get in there in a specific space between two letters and just adjust the spacing between the two, that's not tracking, but that will be kerning. That's the option next to it. For that, you can grab the type tool again, and let's say you wanted to bring the I don't know, let's say we want to bring the N closer to the A. You could hold down Alt and then press left or right, and you'll notice that as I do that, as I hold down Alt and then press left or right, it'll move the letter. And as I do that, you'll also notice that in the kerning section, the number has changed. So that's actually looking pretty cool. So maybe I'll go ahead and bring the R closer to the A too, and try to make this look a little bit more artistic. And actually, as I'm doing this, maybe we'll figure out eventually that we need to do this to all of them. So now I'm kerning, this R closer to the B, And actually that's not looking so good, so we'll give it a little more room here, and then I'll maybe just put the D directly touching the N, right? So that's looking cool, or maybe looking terrible. I mean, again, you know, I'm just throwing these ideas out here, everybody. You don't have to like it. I kind of don't like it either. I'm just gonna make it a mess. But anyway, this is how you do that. You put your mouse in between there and you press left and right while you're holding the Alt key. Okay, so if this is cool, that's one thing you can do. You can also keep looking at these other settings. You know, you have kerning and tracking, which we just looked at, and then above them you have the letting. Now that guy, I'm just going to go ahead and put a second line here, second line of type. So let's say, you know, you have your second line of type and you want to play with the distance between the two. If you grab the black arrow now and select everything that you've done, this guy right here, the letting, that controls the spacing between the two. So if I click on that dude and lower it to like 11, they're going to slam into each other because that's not enough space for both of them. Usually the letting has to have a relationship to the font size. Should be around the same size, if not a little bit bigger. So right now if I try 48, you'll see it's not big enough, but if I was to type in something like 120, that would be maybe even too much. So if, you know, this is where you play with it, you can go less or more, do whatever you need until you get it in the right place. So that's your letting. So letting, kerning, tracking, that's some pretty cool stuff. Now, some other things we can do, again, if we click on the black arrow, we select everything. You can play with your type height. You can adjust the vertical height of it, so we can make all the type look taller. And usually that stuff looks kind of weird, but you never know. Sometimes it's a subtle adjustment can look good, like there's, you know, a 10% adjustment to the width. So width and height are right there next to each other. And under there, you'll be able to adjust the baseline, and you'll also be able to do rotations. So for example, I'm going to grab my type tool again now so I can select just a letter. Let's say I want the N to be higher for some weird reason. I can adjust the height, and you'll see that the N now is jumping up a little bit because it has a 12 pixel setting on baseline shift. So I'm going to undo that by doing Command Z is how you undo. And if you were to take a look over here, that's also horizontal scale. Oh, sorry, I already went over that. Went over here is the rotation, excuse me. So that one, if you, for example, grab a letter and then you play with rotation, you can give it a rotation and it'll rotate. And that's something that might come in handy. You never know. But I'm actually going to go ahead now and delete this second line so that I can move on. And the last thing I'll show you here is go back to my brand X. Sometimes when you're typing stuff out, I'm actually just going to change it now to lowercase letters so I can show you something else. Sometimes when you're working on a logo, you're like thinking of, well, you know, is this supposed to be uppercase? Is this supposed to be uppercase? Should they all be caps? What do I do? The type window, this character window, still has some other choices for us here that are kind of useful. This little button here that does all caps, if you click on that, it'll turn all your type into caps, which is a good thing while you're thinking, you know, and kind of rough drafting. And this other guy here is a small caps. That guy's cool too because it'll turn all the little letters into caps, so you can kind of think about both and figure out what you need. And also the last couple things here are, you know, you have a superscript and subscript in case you need to do some mathematical notations, and then you have the underline and you have strike through. So you've got some things to play with. But let's say we're actually, you know, we like the way this looks and we want to go ahead and throw a gradient in there. Right now if I went over into my tools and I wanted to add gradient to this, I'd look down, and underneath my color picker you should see this button for the gradient. Now if you click it once, what it's going to do is it's going to turn on the gradient window, but you'll notice your type doesn't change to a gradient, which is a little bit weird. Now the reason it doesn't do that is because for type to turn to a gradient, you have to break it apart first. You have to turn it into outlines. So that's actually the next step that we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the type, I'm going to right click on it and choose create outlines. Now when I do that, and I'm actually show you what happens when I do that, I'm going to by opening up my layers. I'm closing up character window now. And in layer windows, take a look, you'll see right now it's called brand X because it's a type layer. But as soon as I right click and choose create outlines, it turns into a group. Aha! And in the group now we have every single chunk of the letter is its own individual object, which is great because now we can control it. But what I would do here actually is right click again to ungroup it so that I have more freedom, and then I can move any letter any way I want. You don't have to ungroup, but it just makes my life a little easier. Now if I was to click away, you'll see I can like click on each individual object, which is cool. And now these are all made up of points. They're not type anymore, so if you had to add another letter, you would have to create a new type object by grabbing the type tool. But this is definitely cool for being able to control the letters. And also, the whole point of this was that if we grab this whole section now we can go over to the gradient tool and apply a gradient, which is cool. and we can still apply a stroke or whatever as necessary. But now let's take a look at the gradient tool for a second and see how that works. Now the gradient tool, you'll see, has two different colors. Now there's little cheater options here. You can go to like sky, for example, and it'll give you the sky option. You could also look through the presets for this. If you go again into this little window here, here are those presets that are the basic ones. And we can make our own, actually. We can make a whole bunch of other gradients if we want to, and we can save them. We can also modify them by actually just going and taking a look at this. So here's the gradient editor. Let me return it back to the simple black and white because it's a little bit easier to talk about. So I click back in there and turn it back to black and white. Now these are the two different colors. So I'm just going to double click this little stopper here, and that's going to open up my new window. Now I can pick any color I want. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pick like this blue, this turquoise-ish blue. And I'm also going to go over on this side, and I'm going to pick a turquoise blue as well. Now you might be thinking that's weird because it's not a gradient. Well, I did that on purpose because I want you to see that this is a great way to start with, you know, a really simple color palette and just do subtle changes, because right now, since they're both the same color, if I just make a subtle change to one, it'll be, you know, a nice subtle gradient. So I'm actually going to go double click back on the color stop, and you'll see the color options that I have there. If I want to make an adjustment to that color and make it very subtle, if I click on the little palette here, it'll show me the color window, and I can make very subtle slight adjustments to do that. Or if I was to go into the top right corner, I can change the way that the colors are set up. HSB is cool because it stands for hue, saturation, and black. So this would be cool if I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I just want a hint of black on that. So I'm going to just slide the black slider in just a little bit, just to tint it. So it's just a very subtle change that I made between the color. And let's say I like that, you know, then that's great, because then I've customized my own gradient. If I wanted to add another color in there, sure, I could click anywhere underneath the bar and it'll make a new color. Let's say I clicked in there, for example, and added like a dark blue. You know, it doesn't look so good, so I probably won't do that. But I could add as many different colors as I want. And if you don't want a color, you can click on it and just drag it down and it disappears. But you know, I'm digging this just subtle gradient, but I wish that the gradient was applying across all the letters, not just one. So if I want to change that, I go over into my tools and grab the gradient tool. Now when you turn on the gradient tool, you'll see these little sliders that represent the gradient. Now right now they're representing the gradient on each of the letters. If you want the gradient to go across, you can click outside of the letters, drag across, and it'll do a subtle fade across the whole thing. So that is called, do that again. So right now it was on each one, and this time what I did is I clicked outside and dragged across, and it does the whole thing super subtle. So now if you grab your black arrow and you click away for a second, you'll see you have a really chill gradient, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this. I like what I'm doing, and I'm actually going to go ahead and make a copy of it and just bring it down so we can start to see the different things we can do with this. So we've got a really simple color palette that we're working with, really simple gradient. Let's say you now decided that these letters need to have a certain texture, like they need to have polka dots. Well, how would you do that? Well, one thing you should experiment with, so now I'm going to grab these letters here, is with window appearance. So now I'm going to open up another window, window appearance, which actually was already open, so I'm just going to bring it over here. And in window appearance, you'll see that you can control the properties of an object. So I'm actually just going to click on one object right now because it's going to make life a little bit easier. I'm just going to click on this X here. And if I click on this X, you'll see that there's a fill and that there's a stroke too. Now the fill right now is that blue gradient. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. I press Command plus to zoom. That's my shortcut, Command plus. Now as I look at the X, right now there's only one fill. Yeah, that makes sense. But I could have two fills. That's something interesting because appearance is like basically just the properties of this layer. So I'm going to go down here to where it says add new fill. Now I'm going to click first on the fill. I'll make sure I'm clicking on my X, and I'm going to click on add new fill. That's going to make a second fill. Now this second fill looks identical, so we haven't seen a change to the X. But if I click down on the arrow, I can apply another color or pattern to this. So I could, for example, add a gradient now, which is weird. Now I'm playing with these gradients and they're really subtle, but you'll notice now that I have an orange gradient on top of my blue, which is weird because it's covering it up. But if I was to go to opacity, which is under there, I could actually start to blend the two. So this is going to make kind of a a weird green because it's mixing the orange and the blue. Do you see what's happening here? We're mixing two different fills in the appearance tab, which is cool. If you want to get even weirder, you can go again to that little option and click in the option little button slider there. That's right underneath that picker, and you go to open swatch library, and you can go to where it says patterns, and this is where you could get the polka dots. For example, if you go to basic graphics and go to basic graphics dots, so again I went in that little option there, I could choose dots and put dots on top of the blue. So that's cool. Look at that. Now I've got this you know, dotted pattern on one of my letters, and that's great. I was able to modify this and make it unique, which is cool. So I put two different fills on one object. And now if I was to zoom out, you'll notice that this guy is more unique than the rest. I could actually save this as a style too, which is even weirder. So let's actually show you that next. If I grab this object again, and now I go to graphic styles. Graphic styles are basically recordings of what you have in your appearance. So if I have this object selected and I go into graphic styles and choose new graphic style, I can call this new graphic style polka dot blue gradient, and then there it is. Look at that. It's got the whole like representation of that there. And now you can do the cheater move of grabbing like a whole bunch of text and just applying the graphic style across it all. Aha, so easy, so cheater. I was able to do that in just one click. So that's pretty cool. Now appearance is also powerful for a lot of other reasons. One of those other reasons, and let's just go back to one letter again so it's just easier to see the changes. If I click on this letter, for example, the other thing I can do in appearance is I can do effects. So if I go to effect right now and I apply stylized, for example, drop shadow, right, which is the classic, and I click on preview to show the drop shadow, you'll see that what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the drop shadow. Now this is a place where you should modify these settings. You don't always just want to go with the stock options. So for example, right now everything is being offset 7 pixels. What if I'm like, you know what, no, I want 1 pixel on each one, so it's a really tight offset. Sure, just type it in. What if you don't want it to be blurry either? Sure, then lower down that to 1 pixel too. So I'm just making this way more simple. Aha, it's getting way tighter in there, way tighter. And then I actually might even just change my blending mode to normal as well. And then I could lower my opacity if I like it to like something really small, like 35%. So you see I'm like modifying all these things as we go. So just always be ready to do that. Now you'll see some pixelization on my screen right now, and that's actually because I'm zoomed in a little tight, but you won't see that depending on those view you're at. If we go and zoom back to 100, it'll look better. But last thing I want you to know here is that you can also change the color. So let's say you wanted to have a pink glow. Boom, you've got a pink glow now. I mean, I know this is looking ugly, but we're going through the practice here, at least of all the different things we can do. So let's just go ahead and press OK, and then there's our letter now. It's gotten all the effect on it. And it'll look a lot better at 100% because, you know, we're zoomed in so tight that we're seeing all the effects kind of pixelated. But what's cool is that it's really subtle, you know, so that's what you can do with these effects. You can get really subtle. Now, let's say you want to change your mind. So I'm going to zoom back in so we can see it again. And you know, you want to make that glow bigger, right, so we can see it easier. Well, then you can go back to the object, go back to appearance, and you can look in the settings for your appearance and click right there on drop shadow again. It opens up the window, and then let's blur up that shadow so we can see it more, adding more to the blur. And there it is, right? I press OK. And now if I was to zoom back out, you can definitely see it now. You know, it's stronger than it was before. And you can keep changing your mind by going into appearance. So always use appearance, everybody. It's a really useful thing. Now let's go ahead and do one final thing here to our text, because we've covered a lot, and I know I've probably been talking a little too fast, but I'm hoping you caught it all. If not, make sure you ask some questions in the YouTube comments below. But let's say you wanted to add a wood grain to this for some reason. Well, one thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to go to the internet really fast, and I'm going to look up a wood grain texture. And if I go to images, you know, here's some wood grains, right? You know, there's all kinds that you can get. Now ideally you'd want to get something that's high res, so you can go to right here to your search tools, you can go to size, you can go to larger than, you can find larger stuff here. So, you know, always use these things that Google's got in there for you. It's a good way to get big stuff. So I'm going to get like a big one that's about the size of my project, 1024 by 768. And you know, let's see, here's this texture right here. That's a great texture, looks cool. So I'm gonna go to view image. Hopefully we can get this guy for free. Yeah, it's a free texture, so that sounds cool. And I'm gonna save this image to my desktop really quick, guys, here. Oop, and yeah, you see all my crazy mess here. Saving it to my desktop. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and paste it into my document. So I'm going to zoom out. And the reason I'm zooming out is whenever I paste a texture, I like to think of this as my paper and this is my table. So I just kind of put stuff away on the side so I don't make a mess. And what I'm going to do now is import that wood. So I'm going to go to File, Place. Now let's make sure I'm not clicking on anything so I don't screw anything up. File, Place. On my desktop, I'm going to find that piece of wood texture. There it is. And I'm going to make sure that I don't check on link, because if you do check on link, what happens is it doesn't actually enter the document, it just stays linked. I would actually like for this to be embedded so I don't ever have to lose it. Sometimes if you check link, things get lost and things get annoying with Illustrator. So yeah, basically don't ever check on link unless you're told to. But yeah, there's the wood. Now here's the super easy way to add the wood to those letters. All you got to do is take the picture and then look at your swatches and literally just take the picture and drag it into swatches. It's that simple. Takes half a second. You'll see that you have a new swatch in there. You just literally, I just clicked in the wood and dragged it in there. I'll do it again. There's no reason to it, but I have two of them now. And there they are. And now you can actually delete the wood because it's in your swatches, and then you can go right to your object, whatever object that is, and let's grab this whole set of words, and just literally all we got to do is just click on that and boom, the wood is in there. It was that simple. Just one click into swatches and I've got it. Now one of the things you'll notice is that it might repeat weird, and a good fix for that, and this is a great little secret, is you want to hold down the tilde button. Now tilde is that thing you see you know, over a letter ñ in Spanish, that little curly Q. It's up in your keyboard. It's next to the number 1. It's on the left side. So it's that little curly symbol. And you're going to hold it down, and then you can click left and right. And that's how you can modify the texture once it's inside your object, so that you can get rid of any weird repeating area. But look at that. That's there. That's great. That's my wooden texture now, and it's, you know, in my type. And then the last thing we'll do is, you know, we broke up this type so we could really get experimental with it, and that's the last thing we'll mess with. Let's say you like are looking at your letters and you're like, oh, you know, I wish this R was a little weirder. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And if I wanted to adjust this R, you can just click on it, because now that it's a shape, since we did create outlines, we can modify anything. And if you just wanted to, you know, just start to distort and move things around, you just grab your white arrow. You can just double click on any point you want, and then you can start to modify the type. Whatever it is you want to do, you can start doing it. Now that's looking pretty bad, so I'm going to do Command Z and Command Z again, but just so you know, I could, you know, move all these things. This is how you can start to connect objects with each other. And of course, you know, this is going to take some practice, and it's going to take some time to really make things connect and make things curve right. But yeah, you can control all the points, you can move all the objects any way you like. And one little thing that's good for this, and when you're playing with this stuff, is whenever you double click on a point, in the top of your screen there's this little convert tools. Those are great because you can take a sharp point like this and then go to convert and turn it into a round, or you can take a round, for example, and then turn it into a sharp, right? So I made that a sharp point. And this is where, you know, spend some time. You got hours to figure it out, and you can really destroy stuff with the white arrow. So we started with regular type, we broke it apart, now we've added some gradients, we played with multiple appearances, and then we added a texture. So it's a lot of stuff, and hopefully that works for you. Let me know if you have any problems with this stuff, and if you do, just give us a comment there. And if you're looking for any other tutorials, I would really appreciate you just asking. Go ahead and ask in the comments or send me a message and I'll bust something out. Thanks for subscribing. I've been getting a lot of subscribers recently, and it's super cool. Please keep it up. And yeah, that's it. Have a lovely day or night wherever you're at, y'all. Much love, and peace.